everyone can see. Okay, thank you. The meeting is now being recorded. If anyone has any objections, please let us know, or simply just sign off from the meeting. All right, okay, we do have a quite a busy agenda item going forward. Some change requests, and we would discuss, and also some updates and a discussion on the AFMM reviews. So without any further delay, let's get started with the agenda item number 1. Oh, by the way, do we have someone scribing?
Yes, I am taking the minutes.
Okay, Joshua, thank you. Can you also note the attendance? So therefore, when we go into voting, we know who have been voting.
Yep.
Okay, all right. Now, the first order of the agenda is approving the meeting minutes on the December the 4th, which is a fortnight ago. Here is the agenda. So here is the meeting minutes in details. If you scroll down to the page, you see them. Are there any corrections that members want to raise for noting and for rectification? All right, not hearing any requests for changing of the minutes contents. Can I have someone who is willing to motion or to move to approve the meeting minutes as an official record of the previous meeting?
I'm happy to motion to approve the minutes, Marika.
Thank you, Marika. Anyone who would like to second the motion?
Michael Osborne.
Thank you, Michael Osborne. So we have a mover and we have a seconder. I have asked the question as to whether or not anyone wants to have any change requests, and hearing none. So assuming there is no further discussions on the meeting minutes, let's call to the vote. Anyone who want to abstain? All right, I haven't seen any hands up. I haven't seen any audio about abstaining. Anyone who wants to oppose? All right, hearing none, so it's unanimously passed. Thank you very much indeed for entertaining that action item. All right, item number
So Stephen,
5.
Sorry, we have, so for the notes, that's 13.
Okay, for noting, we have 13.
Yeah.
Thank you. So we have 14 participating. The chair won't vote, so therefore we have 14 with 1300. Thank you. All right. Item number 2, updates. The first bullet point is Ruben. Are you here?
I am.
Thank you. Can you provide an update?
Certainly. So this concerns the HL7 International FHIR community process. For those of you not familiar with the community process, I've put a link in the chat, which is the dedicated space on Confluence that has all information about it. My update today is just to let the members of the FHIR Work Group know that HL7 Australia has gone through the process of becoming an FCP participant under HL7 International's governance rules for the FCP. We've applied, and the coordination committee for the FCP at the international level has approved the application literally just this morning. And what this means is that all the projects and specifications which we are creating or publish, which align to our stated FCP compliance policies, which are essentially all of our standards development processes and community engagement processes. We are now authorized to publish these as FCP compliant specifications and assert that the relevant projects are FCP compliant projects as well. So just in the interests of the international community and being good citizens in the FHIR universe, this is a really good step for us. And I think we are the first organization to be successful under the newly created FCP requirements as well. So the practical matter, I'd suggest that pretty much all of our FHIR projects and specifications are compliant with our policy, and we can therefore decorate, if you will, these project documentations, conference spaces, and indeed the IGs themselves with the FCP icons for projects and specifications, which you can find on that link I've put in there as well. Happy to take any questions on any of that.
Thank you, Ruben. So members at this call, do you have concerns? Do you have questions for Ruben? I have a hands up. Danielle, go for it.
One comment and one question. I checked in with Lloyd this morning and he says he's still partway through implementing that. So, but it should be done really soon. So that's great. The other part I just wanted to check with in terms of our specifications. So this would be AU Base, AUE requesting. And I have a question about provider directory, which we said was no longer an active project. What's the expectation with provider directory in terms of
the project or the specification?
The specification.
Okay, so I would suggest that if the specification is still an active and unretired one, and it aligns with what we say we will do for our FCP specifications in our compliance policy, then there's no reason we can't put the icon on that one as well. What I'm not so sure of is whether we actually are set up to entertain changes or intend to continue updating that specification. I guess that's a question for this work group.
Okay,
Brett?
thank you.
Sorry, Danielle,
yeah,
do
I was
you have
just gonna
follow-up
comment.
questions?
Yeah,
No.
Okay, thank you. Brett,
that's all right.
you have your hands up.
Yeah, I think we should come back and review provider directory in general and its status and things in the new year, and decide what to do. Yeah. Thanks.
Yep. I also support that. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Brett. Richard, I saw your hand up previously. Do you still have a question?
No, I don't. I still have a question.
Okay, thank you, Richard. All right. Any further discussions? If not, then we'll move on to the second bullet point.
Oh, Stephen, could I just
Yes.
ask, are there any implications for our processes now that we've got this stamp of approval, or are we already following everything we need to follow?
We are already following everything we need to follow, but the implication is if we change our processes in a way that deviates significantly from what we say we will do under the FCP, we simply have to submit an updated compliance policy to the FCP Coordination Committee.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right. Any other questions? Okay, hearing none, then bullet point number second. Second bullet point, Brett, on HL7 January ballot.
Yeah, so just a note, I think we did this last time. International ballot period is open as of the 20th of December and runs through to 20th of Jan. There are many specs under ballot. I did send an email out. I think I will send a reminder email out before the ballot opens proper. And, you know, we just invite people to consider commenting on those specifications, and note that as an affiliate, we do have affiliate votes available to us with a few members, so we can actually submit ballot votes on issues if you wish to do that from your perspective. Yeah, so I think there's a few interesting things there. I think particularly, I think there's a lab reporting specification and a few other interesting things, plus 6, I think.
Yeah, for those of you
Yep.
who don't have access to the HL7 ballot desktop, I've shared the screen. I logged in as myself, and you can see there are a few items that I've signed up for, and there are below that there are the whole list of other items that are going on ballot in January, with some of them marked as postponed. So happy for you to take a screenshot before I move back onto the meeting minutes page. Yes, Michael, I am. Can you see my screen?
I can't
I
see
can.
it, but that might just be me.
Yeah, I can
Okay.
see it.
Sorry, Heath, you said that you can't see it either.
No,
Is that right?
I can
Oh,
see
you can. Thank you. All right. So now
I've got
let's get. Thank you. Let's now get back to the meeting agenda. All
Sorry,
right.
Stephen.
Yes.
I just had one other comment, and that was to flag to everyone that US Core version 8 is included in this ballot. And as many of you involved with AU Core would well be aware, we tend to take a lot of influence from US Core. And thus, if there's anything you'd like to comment on that one, you're absolutely at liberty to do so. Just contact
indeed.
Brett or myself.
Yeah, indeed. I would like also to add on to what Ruben says. The U.S. Core also has influence on the international base as well. So if you do have any comments, then please contact Ruben and Brett with your comment inputs. Okay, thank you. All right. The next or the final bullet item, the third bullet item under number 2 is ballot cycle. Brett?
Good question.
I assume that is
I think
HL7 AU ballot cycle.
I think we're at the point of we have covered all items we expect to cover for the ballot cycle, so we are preparing changes and looking to release next year.
So I assume that
we'll
means
do that in
that,
conjunction. Yeah, we'll do that in conjunction. AU Core is planning to publish as well next year, so we'll.
So I assume that we don't have
Yep.
February and March ballot. Then the next ballot will be in August. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think at the moment, no groups have indicated they are planning to ballot in March. So we may just have an empty ballot period for the next cycle, which may be a relief to many. But yeah, we expect to have some things coming through for August for sure.
Thank you. All right, the final bullet point on number 2. Again, over to you about the co-chair appointments.
Yeah, so just to note, the FHIR Work Group, there were nominations for FHIR Work Group co-chair a month ago, more than that, and we were looking to fill 4 positions. So we had Jane Gilbert and myself terms ending at the end of this year. Stephen and Danielle continue on at least for the next year. So we were looking to add some co-chairs. And we were looking for 4 slots. We had exactly 4 nominees come in, so we didn't need to run a subsequent election nor find anyone to fill the slot. So that was quite handy. And I'm pleased to announce that we have Josh Hare as a new co-chair from CSIRO, Paran Tikka from Queensland Health as a new co-chair, Jane Gilbert returned from Telstra Health, and myself have been returned as well. So yeah, so that ends up with those 4, Danielle and Stephen as the co-chairs for the next term. Yep. So that's it. So it's all official.
Yeah, thank you. So we have a staggered approach. So your new term will be for 2 years. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. I'd like to talk with co-chairs about that because we do have a mismatch now with 4 co-chairs on 2 years and 2 co-chairs on 1 year. So I think I have some plans on how to address that internally, but we'll probably bring that back to the group. So we'll try and get a stagger set up. Yep.
Okay, cool. Thank you. All right,
Yep.
that closes agenda item number 2. Anyone has any further questions on that agenda items and the sub-bullet points? All right, hearing none, then let's move on to item number 3, AU Base AFMM reviews. Daniel, you want to take a lead on this item for discussion? Hang on, Daniel. Ruben
Yes.
has a okay. Ruben congratulates the co-chairs. Okay, thank you, Ruben. So sorry for the interruption. Daniel, take it forward, please.
Yeah, sure. So we talked, I don't even remember when we last met. It's been a big week, like last week, about AFMM2 for AU Base. I think we've gone through and we've talked overall about having AFMM levels now. We had also now been satisfactorily making AFMM1 decisions. And so one of the things we'd flagged to come back after the connectathon was to look at AFMM2 and what does it mean for AU Base, and then see if there were any artifacts at 1 that we thought could and should be 2 in Base. And we've got primarily 4 kinds of artifacts in AU Base. We've got search parameters, which are the new ones. We've got structure definitions, we've got code systems, and we've got value sets. I might actually start us off with structure definitions.
Daniel, sorry to
yeah.
interject. Do you want to share screen? I can stop if you have screen to share.
Not really.
Okay. All right, that's fine. Just want to be sure. Okay.
But I mean, we might, so for everybody's memory around the AFMM2 stuff, right, I might just pop that in the chat, the location of AFMM2. So if you could go to that, Stephen, that'd be great.
Okay.
And the things that we were talking about were, in terms of AFMM2, it says greater than 80% of core data elements tested by 3 or more independently developed systems. And I think, and also appropriate data and scenarios, but that wasn't really in question out of where we've been taking this so far. So what we wanted to talk about was, what does this 80% of core data elements means? And I think let's start with structure definitions. And I'm going to put one again in the chat to go to. Let's start with something simple. Let's start with allergy intolerance. I've had a look at this, and I think that we can make this relatively simple. That at its heart, it is about the requirements imposed in AU Base. So if we impose a requirement in AU Base on an element, that counts as a core data element.
So tell me how you want me to navigate this, Daniel.
You can just stay there, basically.
Okay.
And I think what that's made up of, both elements with requirements imposed in AU Base. So there are 4 elements there that have requirements imposed. Code does, we've changed the binding. Substance does, same deal, we changed the binding. Manifestation, we changed the binding. And exposure group, we changed the binding. Although reaction shows up in the diff, there are no requirements imposed by AU Base on that element. So I would suggest that the core data elements for AU Base allergy intolerance are code, substance, manifestation, and exposure route. So that's where I want to pose to people. Does that make sense if we treat it like this? We can go through a couple more examples.
Yeah, I think that makes perfect sense because it's where we've actually added some actual diff constraint from the base, from the core FHIR model.
Now let me go to another one to just say,
one thing on that. I like that for this particular one, but there could be
let's get trickier.
There could be mandatory guidance which doesn't appear that way, and I think that needs to be done, but that's probably what you're doing next, so I'll be quiet.
Not completely, but I agree with you. If we've imposed a requirement on a constraint, even if it doesn't necessarily show up on the diff, I think that's our set of core data elements, is where we are.
Yes, that's my point.
Yep. So this one I wanted to now add into the mix, slices. So where we have an element slice, I think it counts as an element. So in this case, medication statement has long term, so that would be one element. But if we went to, and I don't have it linked, my bad. If we went to AU Base patient, we would see a whole set of extension slices. And I think each of those counts as a core data element. Yeah, if you could navigate there, Stephen. Sorry, I didn't provide you a link. So this would now, birthplace would count as an element, Indigenous status would count as an element, veteran status, etc. So where we've sliced an element, in this case it's slicing extension, each slice, because we have rules about that, becomes a core data element, is something I'm proposing. It's easier with extensions, but there are some other instances. The next thing I want to say is we keep this at element level, which is, I guess, against the root. So if we scroll down, see how there's birth date, that all the testing related to birth date sits at the birth date element, even though there are two additional parts there where we've put extensions on that. So we're keeping them at elements, not sub parts of elements, if you will.
So birth date counts as one, not as two. Is that the idea?
Yes, if we had two slices of birth date, I would suggest that would be two core data elements. Essentially what we want to do is say, has AU Base birth date been tested?
Right. So if somebody's tested one example and somebody else has tested one extension and somebody else has tested the other extension, that counts as two tests of birth date.
Yes, and also noting accuracy indicator as an extension is its own structure. So that'll go through testing to determine if it's AFMM2 or not.
So Daniel, do you think like we have to, like say take accuracy indicator, we would count usages of accuracy indicator specifically?
I wouldn't.
Yeah. Why not?
Well, I would do that under the accuracy indicator testing because these are at each of these extension structures get their own testing anyway. I don't think we need to track whether or not like below element level, but we could go further into the list. I'm proposing we keep it at a simple element list for now and not parts of elements. Heath?
So apart from those extensions, which are what I'm hearing is that you would test specifically as part of the extension, what is the change on birth date that needs to be tested at all?
Yeah, so initially it'll be
yeah, in AU Base, yeah.
Well, what you're testing is that the systems can cope with those extensions. And so things will show up is, have we defined the extensions in a way that systems can work with them? Now, that requires two things. One is that the extension itself be usable. And the other is that we have defined the use. We've defined the inclusion of the extension in an appropriate way.
That makes sense.
Now, here's why I'm saying that, because if we look at, let's say, contact relationship. So that would be an element, right? That's an element level. We don't test every single part of codable concept. That's not what we're trying to do. We're not trying to test that data type as part of AU Base patient. Maybe all three of our independently developed systems all supply text. I will. we're not testing 100% of whether or not the codable concept data type works. I'm not proposing we do that. I'm proposing we stay at element level.
Yeah, but I think extensions are effectively more elements, right? Because they're in use in a profile.
They
so you have to
are.
demonstrate you can use it in this profile.
I'm proposing there are only two circumstances when we do that, at the root or at a backbone, when they actually sit at an element level. That would be where I would suggest, and that otherwise we treat them as part of the data type and we don't test the data types. So for deceased, that would be two, right? There's deceased Boolean, deceased date time, because we've got two slices. But we're not testing, we wouldn't treat deceased date time accuracy indicator as a separate element, the same way we aren't testing other parts of the date time data type. Essentially, accuracy indicator becomes part of the date time data type in this instance. So we just
yeah. So you think about it as like a date time extension, like a date data type extension.
Yes. Now, if we go to, can you click on the date accuracy indicator?
Gotcha.
That has its own maturity level. So it still has to be tested. It's not that we're not testing any of the extensions. So just the URL on the right, Stephen, that should work, where it says URL, yeah, that one. I think that'll navigate inside this IG. So this is at FMM2, which should suggest that the URL and the value have been tested by 3 or more independently developed systems. Given what we know of FHIR, this should be sufficient, I think. But yeah, I'd like to keep it simple.
That's okay. That's okay, because I think things that are equivalent to elements should be tested. Yeah, but things inside a data type effectively. That makes sense, I think.
But going back to my clarification on birth date as the example, I think Richard's explanation that we still need to test birth date in the context of the extensions, not the extensions themselves, it makes sense. But at the element level, as you're suggesting, Danielle.
And I'm not in favour of what Richard has suggested. That would be saying we need to test birth date accuracy indicator and we need to test birth date, birth time. And I don't think we do to hit FMM2 for AU Base patient, like for that element.
Okay.
These are optional. These are optional parts, just like birth date has a date. There are multiple optional parts of that data type.
Right. So if the people that would say that to pass this, people need to implement birth date, and so for us to know that they're doing that, but they don't need to there's no need for anybody to have implemented any of those extensions on birth date.
Yes.
Right. Okay. Yep. No,
that is true.
That's nice. No, that's nice and clear. I'm not questioning the sensibleness. I'm just getting clear about what is being proposed.
I'm also going to work through another scenario. So say you had a data type profile that used those.
Okay, let's go to it. And that is a
you would
slight
have to
difference,
test
right?
them, right?
So, well, yes, and exactly. So at a data type level, and we've got quite a few, I'll drop this in the chat, is that like we're essentially treating elements, if you can go to that one, Stephen, for IHI, we essentially treat the identifier like a resource. Just wait for the screen to catch up. I've put the link in the chat if you want. Oh, no, there it is. Yep, cool. So scroll down. And so we treat, again, everything up that first level as an element. So IHI status is an element, IHI record status, IHI verified date, then type, then system, then value. We treat those where it's a data type profile. And then this would need to have 3 or more independently developed systems, test 80% of that before we would mark this profile as AFMM2.
Now I'm going to be devil's advocate. Why is this different than if I define these extensions directly on a
Because we're treating identifier as the resource. So this structure, what we do is we say that identifier is the resource. Like in the other one, patient is the resource. That's what I'm proposing anyway.
Yeah.
So I do have a question about the 80%. Does it mean that if there are 6 or 7 items, 80% of any of those 6 or 7 items, and is there any reason why we need to identify some of them as more critical or more important than the others.
I would hope we avoid that. I would suggest we shouldn't be doing that. Or
that sounds hard. Yep. I think we should just stick to the count, and 80% is a good number.
AU Base, I don't think it's necessary in AU Base to do that.
Okay.
One of the things is we're working with derived profile. We're working with profiles that are derived from resources, and those resources themselves, they've got their FMM level, and so we only need to work on the ones where we've made changes.
Yeah.
So we presume that that FHIR core patient is got a certain maturity level. Our profile, we only need to talk about what we're doing differently.
So yes, if and let's take this about the subparts. If in this case, because everything below is mandatory, just by testing type, you automatically pick up its parts, but it's just as meaningful as if it's optional. What you're saying is that if we treat identifier as the resource, we would say, hang on, how many are there? 4, 5, 6. So yeah, we would need 5 of these to be tested by 3 or more independently developed systems before we would declare this as AFMM 2.
Yeah, so we would assert what things we are considering elements, and then give our evidence that they've been tested.
I'm still not sure about birthday then.
Yeah, I'm a little unsure as well. Yeah,
so
I'm just wondering why. Yeah, I'm wondering
so
why.
let's
Like,
know,
say we
these
did,
are
say we
optional
did, say we did have a profile. Say we did have a profile that did that. We would have to test those extensions in that profile. So I don't know why we get a pass in this profile.
Because they're optional at element level, just like other parts of the data type are. They form part of the data type. There's no data type profile. If there was for birth date, then we would. But date.
But
you could
I'm
think of
running
it as
on
a search. You could think of it as a search strategy. Find all of the structure definitions. For each structure definition, identify the elements of interest, and then go through, assess those. If an element of interest, and you may have an extra rule which says an element cannot be more mature than the extension than the extension definition that it has. That might be an extra rule, and then extensions themselves are a structure definition with its own internal definition, and so I think of it as being a sort of a strategy for identifying things to test, identifying things to count. And it's find a structure definition, identify all the elements of interest, and the elements of interest are either elements that have been inherited or they are new root level extensions. That's the list of things to assess. And it's done that way. So it winds up being a way of identifying things of interest in a finite way.
Yeah, I think there's a difference. I think there's a difference between
consider the identifier element. We could just as easily have made those slices and we haven't. So I guess I'm saying there are all sorts of things about the data type. And for me, just because we've listed data type extensions as possible, they're not mandatory. If they were, that would be tested, right? But they're optional. So it's just as valid to have 3 systems who don't use those extensions and haven't implemented them to say, well, yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a difference between, because data types don't have a maturity level, right? So they are a given, right? So we don't need to test data types, right? Or assess anything.
Oh, hang on, I've got a converse argument to that. Those extensions go through their own testing.
Yeah, but like standard extensions, like say birth time, that's also not. That's not in our domain. So we assume they are running. Their use is confirmed.
Have an FMM level associated with the extensions pack extensions, so that goes through their own jurisdiction. Yes.
Yeah, and so accuracy indicator is our extension. So that will have its own level.
Yeah, I don't know what it's at yet. Where is it?
But yeah, so I'm just seeing how this plays out, because if we kind of take data types, and if you take data types and standard extensions as, you know, they're a given because we don't need to assess those. So it's just a question of
well, I think
what
we
does
will
that
need to
mean?
pay attention to standard extensions. If a standard extension has a level 3 and we're wanting to push one of our resources that uses that standard extension to 5, we'd need to then consider about, well, can I have a higher level of maturity than the parts that I'm using? And if we decided that you can't, then the fact that a standard core extension is only at level 3 may mean that, well, we're dubious about making our profile that uses it up to level 5.
That's why I think it's independent, because it's like, I think you can definitely have downstream profiles that are a higher level than the upstream ones. And in fact, I think that's more likely than anything, because depending on what the upstream ones are broader, right, in use generally.
So recorded
it's, yeah.
sex or gender might stay at, oh no, that's the international one. The accuracy indicator might stay at 2 while this thing goes to level 4 or 5.
Yeah, because it's we're not saying that extension is at any level. We're saying our usage is at a level, like in this profile.
Though I think 5 is a different kettle of fish. Let's take 5 out of the equation. 5
Okay,
going
4.
normative. Yeah.
4. Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm just a bit like, I'm not sure why we wouldn't include these. Like I maybe say standard extensions we don't include, but maybe
My argument is they're just parts of the
self-included
data
ones.
type. Are you going to test all the parts of the data type?
Yeah, but like I think the standard extensions have international asserting their level, and
we have our own
in
assertion
use
of our level anyway
but
for the others.
they're asserting it in the use with the data type. Yeah. So I guess we're doing the same, right? We're just going to assert its use with a data type, so we don't need to make it specific to a profile. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think that's my simple question is, why are we testing it at all? Because there is actually no constraint on it. Or is there,
I think
or is there a
yeah.
constraint on it? Because there are extensions specifically defined, because that's effectively why it's showing in this view.
Yeah,
What's the constraint?
Anywhere, whether they're mandatory or not, where we've essentially imposed constraints. Because you could argue the same about preferred. Meh, does it matter? Does it not matter? But anywhere we've gone, hey, we've changed some things, that element should have 3 or more systems testing it.
Apart from anything else, it will be ensuring that people writing software have understood the guidance on what to do with the element.
So we have, I guess, 2 camps. Me, who wants to keep it at element level, and others who want to suggest that if there are specific parts, and so this could go into other things, specific parts of a data type that are constrained, that those things should be counted. So let's say there's a date time there for deceased. If we did more than put coding as an optional thing, if there was some other thing called out, then should that also count as an element? As in, essentially, it's the count of total constraints, not what counts as a core data element, which I guess is what I'm cautious about.
I'm happy with your approach. Yeah.
Can you bring up the other example resource that we had before, the other example profile?
Which one? Allergy?
But just to Heath's point too, there is actually a constraint on birth date. It's related to the use of the extension. So there is actually a constraint.
Yeah, I think the allergy intolerance one.
Okay, here we are.
Yeah. So, oh no, not that one. The other one.
Which the other one?
That'll
This
be
one?
IHI.
The IHI? This one?
Oh no, that one there. Yep. So in this one, from what's one way is to say that when we're counting the things, one idea, if we count IHI status, record status, verified date, type, system, and value. Another way of counting it is to say I count IHI status, record status, verified date, coding, type system, type code, and then also system and value. And I think Danielle is saying that when we get to type, we count that as one. Not that we don't test system and code, but then when we're counting the things to know whether we've got sufficient coverage, we just say, have they tested type? Yes, they've tested type. Good. We've done our assessment of type, or we've done our implementation of type. But it seems that what the alternative idea is, no, we should count type, coding, system, and code as separate items. And that would mean that, for instance, you wouldn't have to test the extensions IHI status, record status, and you might not have to test two of them. You might only have to test one of them because of the extra number that's been included because you're now counting every part of type. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I see what you're getting at, Richard, and I somehow agree with you.
If we count more small things, then 80% is met more easily. I think that's the summary one.
Yeah, but the flip side of the argument is if you look at the type where you have 3 other elements, all of them are mandatory. So why wouldn't you want to count them?
Well, I mean, you do just by testing type there in that circumstance. It's about the testing of core data elements and maybe not. I guess that's the difference between the phrasing of core data elements versus the phrasing of constraints. We could literally have a test and count every single constraint and go, did we test that? Did we test that? Did we test that? Or do we leave it at data element level and just have to determine what we view as a data element? That's how I approached my perspective.
Okay, let me do a time check. We have several sort of a change requests that we need to go through, and we are sort of about 40 minutes to the end or to the end of the meeting today. Right. So do we want to continue the discussions knowing that we might not get to all those 4 items in here, which we have to sort of
let's move on to just do search parameter and come back on code system and value set. There's a couple of people who wanted to be here around that who couldn't.
Okay, so which one do you want me to get to?
Can you go to search parameters heading up the top? So I guess I'm saying let's move on from structure definition. We've had a discussion. I don't know if we're at a consensus position to move forward. So let's leave it. It probably helps that there's no, in my analysis, I don't think we can actually move anything from 1 to 2 anyway. So meh. Scroll up, Stephen, and go to artifacts.
Can we go
yes?
for that? Can we? I would like to sit down and articulate what we've talked about and what things you would need to test or could include, because I think there's some interesting questions that come out of.
So artifacts, where do we want me to go? Search
parameters.
Okay.
But to Brett's point, I don't think we reached a position on where those are. I do think the minute should say what we discussed.
No. Yeah. I just want to say, like, I think there needs to be something articulated as to the criteria for when you include it or not include it, because I think there's some interesting things, especially with types choices and what we talked about now, because I think it'd be good to write it down so we consider it. Cool. That's all.
Yeah. So I think unlike structure definitions, search parameters theoretically is a lot easier to work that out. So I'm just going to go to the R4 definition of a search parameter. If I go to resources and we've got these ones here that we've defined in AU Base, and what does 80% of those mean? I think similar to structure definitions, it's 80% of where we've put requirements. In this case, these are all definitions of new ones. So they're not constraints on existing things. They are brand new search parameters. And there's a whole number of normative things you can do. And I've popped a link in the chat to the search parameter FHIR resource. And of all the possible things that could happen, I think really there's a set of these that are normative and a whole bunch we don't pay attention to. So if we look at the diff, things that are normative and should be tested would be, if we come past the usual metadata of like jurisdiction and purpose, code is that first one. That's the thing you actually form like in a get or a post. So I think this list for me is quite clear, as in it's the set of normative things that make up the search parameter. I'll post those in the chat, that it's essentially code, base, type, target, expression, and then multiple or, multiple and, comparator. If you know there's any shall implement a modifier or shall implement a comparator or something, or a shall implement a define any components. So it's all of those are the normative parts of the search parameter. And I would suggest that that's, I guess, that set of things, however many of these are defined, is what we take as the core data elements. Let's go to an example. So back on the search parameters page that you were on, yeah, one of the tabs, you're turning into me. If we go to Indigenous status, perhaps, or any one of them is fine. Click on any one of them, doesn't matter. And we have a look at the JSON because the rendering's a bit weird. So as we come down past that metadata stuff, we'd see, like, if we wanted to test this, it would essentially be testing the search parameter. And you would have to use, keep scrolling down if you can, Stephen, to about stop there. So the normative stuff kicks in at code and keeps going. So we would want to test that we have searched using that code on like encounters, and that we've search of type token, and that's the expression. And then we can ignore the rest actually, because they're maze. But I think it's the normative stuff is what we would want to confirm and say that if we have tested discharge disposition, we would want evidence of the use of this discharge disposition in 3 or more independently developed systems. But I also feel like we're running out of time, and maybe I should write this up and then we can codify it in a future meeting.
Yeah, we are. So
it occurs to me that what we want to test for the lower maturity levels might be different to what we want in the higher ones. So in the higher ones, we might want to ensure that a number of the maze have been tested, and at the highest level, maybe that all of the maze have been tested. But at the lower levels, we may want to simply say all of the musts have been implemented.
I think maze should be ignored. The maze were included in this purely for IG rendering. Like maze, may applies whether it's there or not. Like a search parameter might have all these other things, and may means it might be there, it might not be there. Like it has the same normative result.
I guess what I'm thinking is at the high levels of maturity, up around 4, you might have found that none of the maze have been tested, and so that they're actually still flaky because nobody's implemented them. So I'm thinking not at the one, not at the 2 and 3 levels, but I'm thinking maybe at the high levels. But I haven't really thought that through. It just occurs to me that maybe at the higher levels, people would expect to have prior implementations have already happened of everything in it, not just the normative stuff.
all right. So I think we are really running out of time. So what is the way forward, Danielle?
I think the way forward outside of the minutes is I'll write up some of this stuff, some of the results of what I was looking through, and put that on Confluence somewhere. and we can pick it up when we have a specific thing we think should be AFMM2. I think actually there's one search parameter that can be. Otherwise, I think none of the current resources in AU Base have enough evidence yet, which is because we don't have an independent evidentiary basis. I think out of the last connectathon, if we'd bothered to track it, we would have found that some of the AFMM ones could be 2. So I guess in January meeting, I'll bring back how do we want to look at moving this forwards.
Okay, sounds good. So in that case, then we have action items on Daniel to write up some descriptions or disposition recommendations for us to move forward, and we'll come back in the January meeting to discuss that further. All right, awesome. All right, number 4, we have we have 2 action items or change requests. So who is going to take on this too?
Stephen, I'm just wondering if we start with the second one, because that looks like it's going to be a lot smaller than the first one. I think the first one will take a lot of time to discuss.
Okay, sounds like a good suggestion. All right, so here we are.
Dushy's away, so I'll speak to it. Oh, sorry, was that you, Brett? Were you going to talk to it?
No, not me.
Okay. So AU-based diagnostic result actually constrains out one of the allowed data types, and pretty sure that's a mistake. And it should be allowed, that it's meaningful for a diagnostic result to have timing. I've heard that be said by quite a few people around all sorts of different things around urine analysis over time and sleep studies and so forth. So I think we need to allow for timing rather than rule it out in that AU base profile. Do you want to go to that one, Stephen?
This one?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, effective. This ends up with only date, time, and period and is missing timing. And I think that's a mistake. I think it should have timing in effective X to make that an allowed type for diagnostic result in AU base.
Yeah, I think any specific constraint, I think, lives in a reporting spec sometime in the future, if there was to be any assessment of this. So especially in AU base, I think we should relax it.
Are there any concerns from people if timing is allowed?
Is it different to period? Like, can we have a look at the data type?
Yeah. Well,
yeah, if you go to observation, Stephen, you can get to it.
Yeah,
Timing allows you to say this happened on this day and this other day, rather than it allows you to be complex in describing.
You want me to look at timing?
Yeah.
Yeah, even instant, right? That's another. I think that would actually be used for devices.
Yeah, fair enough.
Let's include instant as well, because we can always knock it out further down.
I guess it's like I don't know. Michael might have a comment. The you know, whether there's a V2 thing going on in that idea that timing is just way too hard.
That just looks like a Swiss Army knife.
Yeah,
like it's like you could do period in there as well.
Yeah, and you also have day of week. You will also have time of day.
Yeah, handles repeating and yeah.
I wonder whether this was discounted purely because it gives you too many ways to do things.
Yeah, but I think the thing is, like, it hasn't been assessed by a committee to make that decision, so I kind of feel like it's a bit premature.
So if you look at a patient who has multiple episodes of atrial fibrillations that are being captured in, say, for example, an ECG machine, all right, and then you want to sample them and you want to record them and report them in observation resource, does that sort of fit better into the timing data type or than the period data type?
I don't know. That's the thing. It's no one's
look,
gone through this.
Look, I will have to go back and have a look myself as to sort of whether or not the period would support that as well. But in principle, I don't object to sort of allowing that. I can see a number of clinical use cases for that. It's just that I need to look into the differences as to sort of run sort of the use cases past the timing versus period. But in principle, I don't have any concern about it.
The issue that, the actual issue that Dushi raised said one thing, this fights against the idea that BASE doesn't prohibit things. It just sort of says, gives you extra options. The other one is just because it's possible to use timing doesn't mean that we're requiring people to support timing. That would come in an AU core profile. This is about an AU base profile.
I agree.
Related to that, Richard, is while this is already a slightly constrained profile, which is okay because it's one of the more use casey ones that sits in base. I think we would need, in a base perspective, a strong argument to prohibit use of an allowed data type, and I don't think we have it. Noting what you'd said, that when this is used in downstream IGs, that can be constrained as appropriate.
So, Richard, is your proposal to relax to all or just to include timing?
I think we should relax to all. This is, it may not be likely, but you could decide that you want to have a sequence of these with very precise times, and that's what instant is for. I don't know what sorts of diagnostic observations you'd want to be able to identify down to the level of detail that you need for instant, but I think it's a mistake to say you can't do that.
Me too.
All right. Do we hear that you you are happy to put a motion on the table?
Yes, I'll put a motion on the table that that all of the possible choices for effective be preserved, that none of the options for effective be constrained out.
So we are going to relax the effective to including effective date time, period, timing, and instant.
That's right.
I'm happy to second that. Oh.
Sorry, did I hear somebody else?
Yeah, it was me, Steve Swinsberg. I can second that.
Okay. All right. Steve, I second that. Okay. Any questions? Further discussions? Concerns? Implications? All right. Hearing none. Let's call to the question. So, do we want to launch an online poll, Daniel, or are we happy to take the verbal counts?
Oh, why don't we do an online poll? It's always good fun.
Okay. So, can somebody launch an online poll?
Yep, it's been launched.
All right. So the resolution is to relax the effective choices to include all of them, as we see in the screen here. So we have a mover, we have a seconder. Let's sort of vote. All right, the numbers are getting up. All right, so okay, still going. Okay, is there anyone who can't vote? And needs to be manually counted?
Yeah. Brett here. I'm a plus
Okay.
one affirmative.
Yeah, so I'll end that poll. I'll share the results. If we
Yep.
take into account Brett and me, is there
Yep.
anyone else who couldn't vote that needed to do a plus? Okay. Can you see those exact numbers, Stephen, or should I read them out?
I see. I have 8 affirmative and
So
2
that's-
abstains.
Yeah, 10 if you
Yep.
count Brett and my plus one affirmative.
Yep. So we have 10 affirmative and 2 abstains and no negative. All right, we'll end the poll here. The number hasn't changed, so that's the number for now. Okay, the motion carries. All right, so that's an easy one. Let's go to the next one, which is that one.
Thanks, Stephen. I'm happy to speak to this. So just in summary, this was about there being a usable value set and code system pairing for PBS and MBS item numbers, like treating those as separate things. The problem is that currently the published value set and published value sets and code systems that contain the OID for PBS or MBS pointing to a padded data set that, and the padding rules aren't public. I have gone back to BP and have just confirmed, so they get their MBS item numbers as a direct download, like literally go to the website for MBS and click download, and all of the data that comes in from there, that's not modified, so it's unpadded. And PBS, when that data is pulled into the system via the API, that's unpadded as well. They don't modify the data before they put it into the database. So I think there are a couple of people that had things to go away and come back with extra information. And then I think the goal of today was to go and write a list of action items or questions that need answering so that we can say what the next step is.
Okay, thank you. Anyone who has any questions for Marika? All right, I haven't seen any hands up. I haven't seen anyone speaking up.
I have a comment. It's nice to see this piece of messiness having some work done on it.
Thank you, Richard.
So can I just check what the action is on that?
Yeah, that's my next question.
Yeah. Yeah, because I find it a bit like I would really like to support implementers. I mean, it's getting distributed unpadded. So I'd like a pathway to have a common usage and say what to do when it's padded or unpadded, and give people a pathway so that we can at least have a common understanding. So yeah, I guess the question is how to achieve that.
I think that were there any other people who from the discussions last week went away and came back with more information? From memory, there were 1 or 2 that needed to go and talk to people about things.
Yeah, there was one on the agency. Was that you, Richard?
Found the unmute. Possibly. I hope not. I haven't done it.
Richard wasn't specifically mentioned in the minutes on this
No.
item.
Yeah, I think we had an agency volunteer and I don't remember who it was.
No, and it looks like we've not recorded it in the minutes either. So
I think there's a long-term project, right, where we expect there to be a publication at some point of these, but that is not in our power to make that happen. And that will have its own definition. I'm just trying to work out in the interim, how do we make sure that there is a suitable, agreed system URL to use when
Can
representing this
I-
content.
Well,
Yeah.
can I add to this? One of our stated kind of objectives from the last meeting for this one is to be clear enough on what we would want, that we could ask Christy, who absolutely agreed that she would go away as Department of Health point of contact and work those through. So if we want an agreed canonical system URL that is well, in this case, we want an agreed OID, don't we? Because we already have the canonical URL for PBS, but maybe we don't have one for MBS.
Yeah,
It's for us to come up with a list of things that we would need.
Yeah, the OID definition says it's padded, and its usage is not. Yeah, like its source data is not padded, and so therefore anyone using that with unpadded data is technically not correct. And there's no one
Which is
testing it,
everyone.
because there isn't, which is everyone. Yep. Yeah. So I think this request makes sense because you just detach the OID, and now we're independent of that requirement.
I think
so we're not asserting it's padded. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
but then
also,
we've got actually one system that is actually doing it correctly, and that's the My Health Record.
No.
So, well, it is.
No,
because
they're just using the OID, so they are correct.
Not sure that's correct.
That was what we were going at. That was the task on the agency, was to go away and investigate the usage both internally in the My Health Record and the mobile gateway and report back on that for us. So or still
So
can we get a volunteer from the agency while we're doing it?
If we remove the OID, we're relaxing it, and so they're still valid, and so is everyone else.
Yeah, but then we have nothing. So
yeah, but we have no way to test it anyway.
So it seems like at the end state that we will probably have, that very possibly what we want is an OID for padded and an OID for unpadded, and a URL for padded and a URL for unpadded.
Can I just state there, I don't think we need two URLs because we can just, sorry, Marika.
I agree with you, Danielle.
So the URL, so the problem is the OID description says this is padded. And
explicitly so.
Explicitly. So we could have a second OID which says I'm silent on padding, and keep the one which says I'm padded, and then we can have a URL which is silent on padding. And so so the new OID and the existing URL could then be paired to say nothing about padding, and then we've just got the one OID that's currently in use which says I'm padded. So is that
no, I guess I was saying I think we could do this, but without being quite that complicated. So because we have an OID and that's what it means, you can form a canonical URL with the OID form, right? So you can actually put it in a FHIR resource and that kind of thing, and make the URL the OID form.
Yeah. And so that gives us a URL for saying padded.
Yes.
And then the other one is, do we want to have a system which says not padded, or do we want to have one which says, just have a look and work it out for yourself?
Well, theoretically, the canonical one, which is PBS, is what they publish. That's non-padded. So that is, by its definition, the codes as published by PBS, which are non-padded.
Right. So the URL is for non-padded. And so the thing being, we can have an OID for padded.
I think we could actually solve it that way.
No. An OID for unpadded. So we've got an OID for padded. If we add an OID for unpadded, then that will solve the problem.
Why do we need an OID at all? It's the URL we care about for FHIR.
My Health Record and CDA and OID-based systems that use the OID.
But that's not our problem.
Your problem is the fact that an OID is associated with the URL, and they're actually describe different things.
Correct.
Is that right?
Well,
yeah, that's exactly right.
Currently, we're using the OID as a URL, representing what by definition is padded, but what we need is an URL of some sort. I don't care what it is.
Yeah, you want a URL for unpadded. The URL that is the best candidate says, I'm associated with this OID, which is padded.
Yes.
Correct.
So yeah, two things. One is that you want to keep using that URL. We'd like to have that URL detached from the OID, and a good thing to do would be to attach it to a new OID with the appropriate meaning, so that OID-based systems can then continue to, can appropriately represent the unpadded situation.
Which URL are you talking about detaching? PBS?
No, we're looking at detaching the OID, aren't we?
Well,
Yeah,
but
that makes sense to me because it's our code system definition links the OID to the URL, right? And what all this is asking is to remove the OID from our code system so it can be used for unpadded.
Yep. Now,
And I think that makes sense because, like, that's our code system, so we can define it how we like.
So the code system, when the code system mentions an OID, I can't remember the exact the exact meaning here. When a code system mentions an OID, does it say this OID means the same as me, or does it say this OID's in the same sort of space as me?
No, it's a registered OID, so it says this is the OID for the code system.
Okay, right. So it says the OID. It says the OID is a synonym. Okay, in which case
it's an additional identifier, a formal identifier used to identify this code system when represented in other formats. So currently it is incorrect.
Yep. So we've just got a mistaken code system resource that is got an error.
All right, Ruben, your hand is up.
Yeah, I actually earlier I had a question on how terminology servers are meant to deal with padded codes in operations like validate code and so forth. But I actually want to comment on what Danielle said, which I think I'm in agreement with. We should have a canonical pbs.gov.au URI for the PBS item codes, which are exactly as they're defined by the PBS, i.e. not padded. And so I would support us creating a URI like that if we can't use the existing one. But I also wanted to flag that we have published that code system metadata record in AU Base for years, which binds these two things together. And I think we need to take care in, if we're going to detach or untangle the two, what implications that may have on implementers who've adopted it already.
Ruben, in answer to that, when I posted this question initially on Zulip, every implementer who piped up basically said that they were using the code system defined in AU Base, but with unpadded codes. So I think that implementers are already technically using it incorrectly because of the definition, but no one has seen that. So if we detach the OID, suddenly everyone is using it correctly. There's no change for implementers. The department can still use.
Look, that sounds fine, Marika. It's just we do need to bear in mind that we can't just take whoever's piped up on Zulip as necessarily being representative of the whole community. Not everyone is participating on Zulip. I would support an approach where, and happy to work with whoever's interested in pursuing this, where the HL7 Australia board can email all of our members for feedback on a change like this and get a better sense of where everyone is at
All right,
with respect to that change.
I'm mindful of time, so we need a way forward. So what's the proposed way forward?
I'll just comment quickly. One, I like that proposal, Ruben. I'd be happy to back that. And I think the second is this is why we kind of asked the agency to go away and work out if they were actually using that canonical URL in their mobile gateway, but padding. And that would let us know if there was some wider spread implementation of that usage.
All right, well, I see Heath's hand up next and then Brett.
Yeah, can we actually get that, or should we wait for, can we get a volunteer from, is that, because I think you guys could go away and probably answer that question on what the mobile gateway is doing in terms of padding as well and bring that back.
I'll volunteer to go and look at what the mobile gateway is doing with padding. Richard.
Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. So, Heath?
My priority is more about MBS because we currently don't have a URL like we have this PBS URL, and hence people have been using the OID as the URL, and that is basically defined as padding. So I think we need to have this change request or whatever is actually addressing both PBS and MBS. A lot of the conversation is about PBS, but I would actually like to ensure that we've got MBS solving this problem as well, or we have a resolution for MBS as well, because it's worse. We don't even have a code system defined.
Yeah. I'd second that, and I'd suggest perhaps, Richard, when you go away and investigate the mobile gateway, make sure that is looking at both the PBS and MBS item numbers. Sorry, I should have split this into 2 tickets.
So Daniel, are you responding to the comment from Heath? Or,
Yes.
Okay.
I'd
Go ahead,
like us
and
to
then
take
we'll go to Brett.
I'd like us to take or to consider, again, this is why we've got Christy from Department of Health, who's usually here but just couldn't make it today, that we've progressed with Services Australia, the agreement on the PBS one. I think we can do the same thing with MBS and ask Christy to take that forwards as Department of Health. I think that's a possible action.
So you're suggesting we split this into 2 action items, right?
At least, yeah.
I think there's a third in there, in that we should get HL7 to email out all members to then respond with whether or not they're using modified or unmodified codes for PBS and MBS. Okay, and then who is going to take that action item? So Richard takes the first 2, but then we have the third action item that needs a taker.
I would like to argue against that, Stephen.
Okay. Argue against which one?
Against all members getting contacted, because like we could do that for every change we make, and like we're looking at a level an FMM2 code system definition that's in a trial use standard, and this is exactly why you have trial use, and I think the committee should sort it out. It's you know, it's public material that is available for everyone to comment on. And, you know, it will remain at level 2 and still be discussed in the future if there's a problem with the changes. So we should just decide and change it, or leave it as it is and decide to create a new code system. So I think we should just solve the problem.
Anyone want to respond
because
to
this is not a normative standard. We don't need to contact the whole community.
I'm happy with either approach.
Okay. So if you're happy with not contacting the whole members through HL7 AU email, then we have 2 action items.
Sorry, a way to go forwards. Can we get maybe Brett and Ruben to have that discussion offline on a means to, I think we didn't disagree that we should find out more information. I certainly think we should, about how things are implemented. And if that isn't at board level, then fine. I think that was kind of what Brett was saying, keep that at committee level, which also fine for me. I just would like us to get that more information. So maybe we just take the action for Brett and Ruben to work out a means to do that.
Yeah, but like, what's the brief? Because like we talked to the agency and there's been vendors indicate that they want it to work a certain way. I think we take a vote and we make it.
Could we put a survey on Zulip?
Yep.
For example, that's one option. Sorry.
Yeah. And I mean, this is going to get published and go through testing and everyone gets a chance to comment on it and ballot on it. So this is not different than anything else.
So the third option is still stand, but with a modification that will stand up a survey on Zulip. And I need an action taker. Do we have anyone volunteer to do a Zulip survey?
Is that relatively easy to do? If that is, I don't mind being the person to do that.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
yeah.
Sorry, Stephen, if this has already been discussed on Zulip, what difference is a survey going to make?
I think it would be, instead of it being in that one thread, it being a call for information in a separate thread in Australia, so that it's a chance of reaching wider.
Yeah, and I'm very happy to post to committees, like, because everyone that's interested in doing committees, like, that makes sense to me, because then we've got the kind of standards committee feedback,
and it also
and it's all public after that.
Yeah, it's also offer a second opportunity for people to respond for those who might have missed it.
So the questions are using modified, i.e. padded, or unmodified inputs for MBS and PBS. Those are the two things that we're looking for.
I think there's two things going on here. One is what codes do they use? And the other one is how do they identify them in their systems?
Yep.
On the wire too. So it's in a FHIR implementation. They've got to separate it out from the Eclipse.
So we have an action item that Marika has kindly agreed to take up, and then Richard has 2 action items, right? Josh, you have a question?
That's right. I'm just trying to clarify. So I've got the 2 action items. So one to investigate mobile gateway, looking at MBS and PBS by Richard, and then the Zulip survey by Marika. What was the third action item on that one?
The first action item is actually split into 2. One is about PBS, the other one is about MBS.
Okay, so that's been split into 2. Thank you.
All right. We have about 3 minutes left, and I need to go to another meeting. So I think that we have action items to take forward to the next meeting. So I think we'll stop the meeting here, and our New Year meeting will be on the 15th of January. Anyone has any other questions before we close the meeting for today? All right, if not, then thank you everyone for your engagement and active participation and contribution, and really appreciate that. And thank you, Josh, for taking notes. We will reconvene with the 3 action items. 4 action items. One on against Daniel for writing up for the FMM to AFMM process, and then 2 against Richard on PBS and MBS, and then 1 against Marika on the Zulip survey. So with those action items clear, and we can adjourn and meet again in mid-January.
Thank you, Steve.
All right, thank you again.
Thanks, Stephen.
Thanks, Stephen. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Happy New Year, everyone.
All right.
Yeah.
Merry
Bye.
Christmas and Happy New
Merry
Year.
Christmas.
Have a happy festive season.
Thank you.
Thank you.